I'm super excited to have this conversation with Tom Szaky, the founder of TerraCycle and the most current project that he's been working on called Loop. Tom, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
I just have to say, Tom, it's been less than a year since our last conversation. How insane is that?
It's amazing that it feels like so much has happened in such a short period of time. I mean, imagine we've jammed a lot of news in, right? Lots going on.
We jammed a lot of news in. Yeah, it's insane. It's like we've aged, decades
Right?
in less than a year. So Tom, I would love for our audience to get to know you a little as an environmental leader. Would you mind sharing a bit of your backstory of how it is that you came to found TerraCycle and why you focused your capacity and attention on this issue of the waste that we create?
Yeah. So for me, there's sort of two questions in that is what's sort of brought about this idea of focusing on purposeful or social or mission-driven business. These would all be somewhat synonymous, and then waste as a specific topic. So for me, I first fell in love with entrepreneurship, to be honest, at a young age in high school, really for the personal, ego trappings of fame and fortune, right? All those sort of very self-motivated reasons. And I remember very clearly when I got to university, actually in my first class, the professor gets up on stage at Introduction to Economics, and a very appropriate question. She asks, "What's the purpose of business?" And make a long story short, the answer she was looking for was profit to shareholders. And it really took a lot of sort of wind out of my sails because if you think about a business, it interacts with so many stakeholders, consumers, vendors, employees, all these stakeholders. And I bet you very few of them care about profit to shareholders. So how can that be the reason? And it sort of sent me on this sort of utopian desire to say, let's make business in the business of how it helps society and or the planet. And then that it does so at a profit and really move profit to a very important role, but as an indicator of health, not the reason of being. And then garbage, to me, is such an interesting, fascinating subject because, or sort of, area, if you will, because think about it, everything we own, and don't just imagine now like, sort of a disposable object near you, but literally every single physical thing that you can see, from the walls in your home to the floorboards behind, below your feet, to the couch, to your clothing, everything will one day legally belong to a garbage company. I mean, what industry can actually say that? And for how crazy big that is, the garbage industry is also the least innovative industry in the world per dollar of revenue it enjoys. So that is actually an entrepreneurial dream of sort of blue ocean innovation opportunity, and it's incredibly purposeful. And it's been kept me very busy for at this point 2 decades, and I expect to continue in this journey for quite a while.
That's an amazing context, right? That like literally everything around us is disposable on some timeline. But you've been, I think my understanding is you've been building TerraCycle around some of the waste that's generated in the short term. Can you tell us what's evolved around packaging or why TerraCycle kind of approaches recycling it with that very inclusive reach that you tend to apply?
Yeah, so the key question as we think about the circular economy and progressing from linear systems, take, make, waste type systems, to circular ones where the molecules in the material can continue to cycle around. This is becoming increasingly important as we realize the strain we're putting on the environment, because the biggest strain in a product is not the shipping, where it's made, or those sort of things. It's the extraction from the earth. It's mining, harvesting, farming, those sort of activities. And it's important to know, what makes something have a proper end of life. Like a recycling solution is not whether it can be, but whether a garbage company can recycle that object at a profit. That's really what makes something recyclable or not. And so we realize that it's a business model issue, fundamentally. It's not that a dirty diaper can't be recycled. It's just that it costs more to collect and process than the results are worth. So it's an economic issue. And that's actually very solvable with business. So in the end, everything is a waste problem in some degree. Everything has an end of life, as you said. In fact, 99% of what we buy has an end of life within the year we bought it. Only very few things are really what we would consider durable, and even durable goods have end of lives within years, at most decades. So the key into this is to construct business models for absolutely every type of waste stream, so that we can get the funding to collect and recycle them, whether it's from brands, retailers, governments, you name it, and then to try to produce value from that, so these actors want to fund. So, as we've talked about dirty diapers, if we can show a diaper brand that's going to, no one's going to buy more diapers because a diaper is recyclable, but if we can show that that's going to increase preference or, drive some benefit that they can measure, then they would absolutely love to get that benefit through purposeful activity, like having diapers recycled, then call it benign activity, like just funding a TV commercial. And once you start doing that, that then unlocks a progression of what can occur. So as we started collecting and recycling these waste streams now across 20 countries, then companies started asking us, well, how can we integrate that back into our products? And then when that conversation starts happening, then we can start challenging the entire notion of single use and moving from single-use ecosystems to reusable ecosystems. Again, tightening that circle in the circular economy.
I want to get us closer to, I guess, deeper into unpacking the conversation of the circular economy, but just a minute, because it's pretty mind-boggling that there is a means of recycling something like a dirty diaper. Can you walk us through what, it doesn't have to be the diaper, but is there a good example of something that we wouldn't expect could be recycled and what you can do with a material like that?
So let me maybe pick 3 random ideas on the spot here. Why don't we do diapers because we talked about them, and maybe we'll try plastic gloves because they're very topical. And let's say, what's another weird one? Cigarette butts, just for, to go out on extremes. So the technical solution. Start with plastic gloves. Plastic gloves are vulcanized latex or nitrile, which basically means they can't be melted again. Right. So when we collect the plastic gloves, and it's actually been trending quite a lot, as you can imagine, during the time we're living through, we cryo-freeze them, which means get them down to incredibly cold temperatures, which makes them brittle. Then we can pulverize them into a powder, and then you can take the powder and integrate it back into new plastic gloves or other things to perhaps create the grit on the fingertips. So that would be something like plastic gloves. In cigarette butts, right? Actually, the most littered waste stream in the world. We collect them, shred them, separate the ash tobacco paper, which is composted, and take the filter, which is actually made from a plastic called cellulose acetate. Now, that plastic may seem foreign, but if you have a pair of eyeglasses that are made from a plastic frame, the plastic frame is also cellulose acetate, to give you a sense of where else that shows up. Okay. And that can then be turned into all sorts of other plastic products. And same with diapers. They can be collected, sterilized, shredded, and then you can replace the plastic, segregate the plastic components from the superabsorbent polymers, which absorb urine, and every one of those things can be reconstituted. Now, the important part in this is that we could rattle off 100 more waste streams, and I can give you the answers in this way. The issue that is a common thread through all those examples is that it just simply costs more to collect and recycle, say, a cigarette butt or a plastic glove or a dirty diaper, than the materials are worth. And today, recycling only exists for those materials where the material value is enough to cover all those costs. That's why we enjoy aluminum can recycling in most countries in the world, because aluminum is very valuable. So it's constructing a business model where some actor is going to want to fund that happily. And it's not just saying, please pay the bill, but it's saying, here's how it's going to benefit you organization for doing so. And that's the sort of secret sauce to how we've built an enterprise around the world on this.
So take me down the path of the kind of circular process here. When we are talking about, like, let's say the plastic that's used in eyeglasses, is it typically the same product that we apply the same recycled material to, or is there a secondary market for what's created? And then second question on that is, are there ways of compacting that further so that it's within a single industry you're looking at the same materials?
It's a really good question, because in recycling, we tend to not, there are examples where it's like package to package, that it goes truly in the nature of what you're describing as closed loop, but it's rare. Usually when we recycle something, it downgrades to some degree. Actually, paper is a really good example, because many times people say, well, plastic can only be recycled a certain number of times, and it's true. Paper has the least number of potential cycles on it. So imagine like you're first enjoying bright white paper, that you may put in your printer, and you recycle that may end up as newspaper. Then you recycle that may end up as toilet paper, and that's your endpoint. Because what happens in paper recycling is the fiber lengths start getting shorter and shorter. And at some point, it cannot form high quality paper anymore, which is why the last step is always something like toilet paper. And so you'll notice this is sort of a down cycle. And that's actually very common in recycling, is that it sort of always downgrades one step. So if we recycle, say, eyeglasses, they won't turn back into eyeglasses, they'll turn into something else. And then that can then turn into something else, but usually sort of a downgrade. Now, the reason that this exists is systemic, which is that we design our products from a virgin mentality. Now, what I mean by that is, if you're a product designer and you're going to design, say, a shampoo bottle, you're going to design it with the capabilities of what brand new plastic can do. Capabilities in how thin the plastic can be, how can it, be squeezed, can it drop, how flexible it is, and even the price. So that then when your organization, say, a decade later wakes up and says, now we care about environment and now we'd like to include recycled content in that bottle, you're going to try to find recycled content that behaves like the virgin plastic in both the characteristic of price and performance. And so here's the big issue. The only recycled content that behaves like that is municipally sourced beverage containers, which is why, have you noticed almost any recycled product is always how many soda bottles it took to make it? Like whether it's a t-shirt or anything, it's always saying this was 4 soda bottles, this was 7 soda bottles, but it's not saying this was 7 shampoo bottles or this is something other plastic object. It's always soda bottles. And there's just not enough soda bottles to go around to get everyone to be able to make from recycled content. And so the systemic shift we need as product designers is to not design from a virgin mentality, but design products to embrace all sorts of waste so that we're really creating markets for things that are outside soda bottles.
Well, so then the next step then is not just recycling, but actually reusable packaging, right? And having product designers who embrace that process of creating reusable packaging. And so you launched Loop in early 2019 at the World Economic Forum. Can you tell us a bit about how Loop works? And clearly you come at all of this with your economist hat on. So what makes Loop work as a business?
Absolutely. So, first to go to the first point, I think the real challenge we have to think about, which is only an idea since the 1950s, is this idea of single use. I don't think plastic is evil or alloy is evil. Frankly, I don't think a material can be evil, right? It's how is it deployed that could be good or bad. And, isn't it fair to say we dishonor material by using it for an incredibly short use? And that's the issue, is single use. So the solution to that is reuse, and you have that object go around over and over and over again. Now, what's the challenge in reuse? And this is sort of how Loop came to be, is that there are reuse ecosystems around today. Your propane tank in the US is a very functioning reuse apparatus. So is your beer keg or your 5-gallon water drum. Those are all very long-lasting functioning reuse models, but you can't take the propane tank to the beer place. You can't take the beer keg to the water place, and you see the issue. There are a bunch of what we call mono supply chains. And so Loop is trying to solve that by being a platform for reuse. We work with consumer product companies, and since we launched in January 2019, 100 leading consumer product companies have joined, commercializing about 500 products. So think like Haagen-Dazs ice cream to Tide laundry detergent and everything in between, in fundamentally reusable package forms. And then we work with retailers, like in the US, say Kroger, Walgreens, but we're now in 6 countries with 15 leading retailers, who then impregnate that offering into their physical and digital stores. So how does this come to life? Is say you're in the UK, you can go into Tesco, which is their leading retailer, and you would go to a section of the store that's the Loop section, and there you would find your favorite products, from Heinz ketchup to whatever it may be, in now beautiful reusable packaging. You purchase it, you pay about the same for the content, you do pay a deposit for the package, and then you enjoy it. And then when you're empty, you have a disposable experience. There's no washing, no sorting. You drop it off at any participating retailer. So you could also take it to our partner McDonald's in the UK and drop it off in their bin, and then go and buy your, say, coffee, now offered in a reusable package, and then drop that back off at a different retailer. So it creates this overall ecosystem that's trying to make reuse feel like disposability, because the big insight is consumers want 3 things in products. They want the product to be jam-packed with features and benefits. And for some folks, more women than men, sustainability is a feature and benefit. They want it to have the right value and the right price, and they also want it to be crazy convenient. So if you think about reuse, it really easily wins on features and benefits because the package forms become higher quality materials, like your ice cream container is now stainless steel, may have new functionality and all. So it really wins there. And for those who care about sustainability, that's also a profound feature and benefit. Value comes from scale. And our approach here has been just trying to work with the world's biggest companies to get scale as quickly as possible. But convenience is the biggest issue by far. And most reuse models are less convenient than single use. And that's a big barrier to scale. So what we're really trying to achieve is how do we make reuse feel like disposability? Not asking you to clean out a bottle, take it to a store, fill it yourself, all those things, but you can just throw it out, have a disposable experience while acting reusable. And it's been quite a whirlwind. The project has really captured the attention of sort of the global CPG industry, and it's been quite amazing to see it grow.
Well, I'm so curious how it is received in this disrupted era of COVID, when we're suddenly afraid of everything that we touch. And I would assume that most are much more comfortable with the idea of disposable over reusable. So curious what you've seen with Loop over the last year.
So COVID has been very interesting to the reuse movement as a movement because it's created a fork in the road. What you would call consumer-driven reuse models, like taking your cup back to a Starbucks and having them refill it, or take your reusable shopping bag back to a supermarket, or even go and do a refill station, have been very negatively disrupted. Hopefully these will come back now that we're, knock on wood, slowly emerging out of COVID. But professional reuse models, where the consumer doesn't clean, but the system cleans, and then it's refilled and sold to someone else, frankly, like the entire beer industry in Canada or beverages in Germany, unaffected. In fact, our sales during COVID grew. And there's a key reason for this. Let me ask you, I imagine, you go to a dentist once a year for a teeth cleaning, right? And you sit in the dental chair, the chair of your dentist, and, he or she does the procedure. Have you ever been concerned by the tools your dentist used and that they have been in thousands of mouths before you, and potentially some pretty gunky mouths before you had a chance to enjoy them? Has that ever crossed your mind?
No, and but thank you for planting that idea in my
head.
Right?
I know. Now that's for the next time. But why hasn't it crossed your mind is because you are, I'm sure, fully trusting that those tools were professionally cleaned at the right spec by the dentist. I think we have some skepticism, but you know what I mean, right? Generally, that is, and that's the benefit of of professional reuse, is that the cleaning standards are incredibly high. Like where Loop has a major partnership with Ecolab, the world's largest cleaning organization for industrial cleaning. And like when you walk into our cleaning facility, it's not like your home dishwasher or even like a restaurant system. It is a proper clean room environment where people look like they're working at a pharmaceutical facility, and you wouldn't even recognize the equipment as cleaning equipment. It is at that level, and because of that, there's incredible comfort within. So our actually sales grew during COVID, and we even launched the UK with Tesco in the middle of COVID, and it was just fine.
Well, all that gives us hope. And I think it is a matter of shifting how we think about the products that we consume every day, right? I'd love to find out a little bit more about, the initial topic that you raised here of what's the purpose of business, and the idea of creating a business that has a purpose greater than solely profit seeking or profit maximizing. We look at the issues of justice and inequity. And we ran a program earlier about capitalism and how there needs to be a new path forward. I'd love to hear from your perspective in building your company. How do you see the role of a responsible business in starting to tackle some of the core inequities that are basically built into the structures of business and in the structures of the fabric of our society?
It's a very, very fair question. And I don't think there's a correct answer. So I'll at least give you how we're trying to think about these questions. And there are many, many issues in the world today. And you've raised, really good examples, but the range just continues of what we're dealing with. So I think what I would advise in learning on this is that it's good to pick one central sort of major theme that you can build expertise around, credibility around, and scale around. For us, that happens to be solving waste. So in our core, we're not a social enterprise, we're an environmental enterprise, and we are here to innovate and solve for waste. Now, with that said, we can be purposeful in many things beyond waste. So we keep our core focus And we will never compromise that on how do we innovate and solve for waste. We'll never take on a business model or anything, no matter how profitable, that doesn't fundamentally solve for that. Because if we do, we start losing our purpose. And then we try to do everything we can where we have discretion to benefit society and the planet. So, for example, we're operating nationally in 20 countries. And every country around the world, if it's possible, we locate in the most disadvantaged cities that are available. So, for example, our headquarters in the United States are in Trenton, New Jersey, which is one of the most impoverished cities in North America. And by locating there, we can bring tax revenue, we can rejuvenate the city, we can do outreach and so on. While it's not our core purpose, right? It's not our core reason. We're able to affect that because we can then choose where we locate. And these ideas, we push as much as we can everywhere we can, while holding true to the central theme, which is we are fundamentally an environmental organization focusing on how do we solve for waste. So, for example, in diversity, we are actually a majority female organization. And I think a big part of that too is somewhat conscious, but also unconscious in the fact of who's attracted to our organization. Although it's very strange because most garbage companies are vast majority male, and we're quite the opposite. So I think, but it's important to hold on to that center, because if you don't and you try to solve for everything simultaneously, it's very difficult to scale and to bring real volume to that particular purpose. So in Loop, many people have asked us, why are you working with big oil, big tobacco, these organizations? And they're very fair questions. And our answer is, we're not going to make an opinion on what product should exist. The legal framework will do that. We're going to make an opinion on whether that object is reusable or not, and really be credible in that, and then let other folks fight the other very important battles on should certain products exist or
not. Absolutely fair. At company, part of our values-based training is to look at a stakeholder map, and for each company to consider who are the important stakeholders to them, how do they prioritize what they're trying to achieve, and measure that at the end of the year. But there has to be a hierarchy. And as long as you don't drop any of these fronts and you hold them all in tension, you strive towards the top of the hierarchy, but you can achieve all of it if you keep everybody in mind, right?
That's right. And I think then it hopefully creates inspiration for others to say that it is worth fighting important battles. So, for example, I myself am vegetarian, and I wish every product we served didn't have an effect on animals. But Loop and TerraCycle will serve companies that are animal protein based, and but hopefully we inspire that if we can solve on the garbage side, someone who's really fighting the battle on animal protein can see a path to scale that particular battle.
Tom, we are sadly out of time for this portion of the evening. I think I have time to ask a question or two from the audience. So I'm going to feed you a question that came in through our chat from Adam Robb, which asks, if you could reform or reimagine the way that Amazon operates or partner with them, what would that partnership look like?
Absolutely. Well, we are actually partnered with Amazon and Whole Foods. And there's some really exciting things coming up. So sorry to be unspecific there, but you'll stay tuned. I think the important thing here is if we think about, say, Amazon and really take a step back towards e-commerce, what is really important to think about, especially because during this moment, we are consuming during COVID 30% more disposable goods. And also shifting a lot of our consumption to vehicles, whether takeaway food or online shopping, that maximize and really increase the disposable goods that we buy because of maybe the takeaway food packaging all the way to the shipping boxes and protection that come in an e-com order. Is we need to fundamentally think about how can we make that more circular? How can the organizations take back or be responsible for the delivery devices or even the packaging that came? But I think this is maybe sort of an interesting sort of bigger conclusionary point, which is that nothing that we've talked about is the answer to the environmental crisis we're in. One of the challenges of the environmental crisis is it's very complicated. Who can connect buying a bottle of shampoo to the fact that an orangutan may not have habitat? And sometimes it's not linear. You do something good here and something bad here happens. But there's one unifying thing that brings it all home. And this, I think, has to do with, to the heart of this type of question, which is, it's the act of purchase. There is no good product. The only good product is the product you don't buy. And the reason for that is every product, even the most green, fair trade, hippie product out there, is an impact on the planet. There's no such thing as a product without impact. And so we need to fundamentally, as people, have a meditation as citizens on what is our role, as consumers, and really think about editing the sheer volume of the stuff we buy. Because if you look at the per capita increase in consumption, per person, it is astronomical how much stuff we are buying year over year. I mean, the increase is nuts. And we cannot, no matter how green and circular we make our consumption, that cannot be okay. We have to, and it's very difficult, and I'm also a massive hypocrite in this, but we have to reflect and think about the volume of what we buy. Because yes, we need to buy better, more conscious products, but but that won't be the solution until we fundamentally reduce our net volume of consumption. And if we do that, then models like e-commerce or takeaway food become better because they're not expressed at the incredible volume they're expressed today.
Tom, we've reached the end of our time, but thank you for that. And thank you for very clear marching orders. We need to just buy less stuff. And that's the best thing that we can do for the planet. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us and for participating in this conversation. It's great to see you again.